I'm going to record this because I don't want to get over here. So Helen, I want you to tell everybody how you doing. How you doing, Helen?
I'm doing real well.
And add more color.
Huh?
Add more color.
More color?
Yeah. Say something like. I'm
waiting for the uptaker.
Oh, she's sorting out family records, and we're discussing who should get them when you're gone.
Oh yeah. Well, who should?
Yeah.
Good question.
Who should?
You can't take it to heaven with you, any of them.
None of it. Well, a lot of this.
Is that Helen there?
Yeah,
Over here?
that's your wife there. A lot of these.
Say hi,
pictures
Johnny.
Hi.
That's Johnny, brother over
A
there.
lot of these pictures are already filed online, you know, and
That's all from Woodburn.
yeah.
What do you see down there?
I see all movies here that you recorded when you thought you wouldn't have cable again. Remember you said you didn't think you
Oh,
had
really?
cable? These are all movies.
Well,
So-
we got to get the
I
gems
think
out of
they
there.
were probably over there, Dan.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of VCR tapes.
Okay, here is Rodney and Harvey.
That's a good one there, Dan.
Yeah.
We're looking for the Harvey and Harold show.
Harvey and Harold.
The brothers.
Yeah.
What year? This is like
Harvey and
I think it was in the 80s. They filmed
At
each other.
Grace's.
80s
At
and
Grace's.
early 90s. That one's it.
Dorothy and Children at Panor. Karen's birthday. Harold at Panor.
You know, there's nothing there. I don't think. Yeah. We're missing some good laughter.
Okay, now this is the last day, full day, of Hal's vacation in 1994. He catches a plane tomorrow morning about 8:20 or something.
Danny is
Go
trying
back
to figure
to-
out what in the world we're doing. And,
I'm being interrupted by a giant twitchy roof.
okay.
Before this thing degenerates into utter frivolity, I want to inject a serious thing in here
Oh, heaven.
that Dale mentioned the other day. I think we should have a serious thought once in a while. And do you remember when Dale told that thing about Lincoln during the Civil War when this clergyman wrote to President Lincoln and he said that he believed that the Lord was on our side? And Lincoln's reply was that I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right, but it is my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation should be on the Lord's side.
Okay.
Isn't that pretty good for a
That's
sober thought to kick off this thing before we get into
That's
utter
the real-
frivolity?
That's,
Now, the next thing we're going to do,
can't get a word.
all right, you want
to listen to?
you want to talk now, or do you want
No,
Danny?
no, you go ahead.
Well, I'm not going to put John.
He's rolling.
I'm not
He's
going to
rolling.
put.
Let's let him roll.
Well, you don't want John Milton's on his blindness now, do you?
Well, that's probably at the end.
Yeah, I think we should end it with that. We'll put that over here for the end. Now, do we want to go back to Minnesota and clean up what we haven't covered there from yesterday? Let's start out with the fact that when Pa wanted to get married, he was 28 years old. And his stepmother, who of course was quite selfish and wanted him to stay on the farm and work his butt off and make money, because that's all that she really cared about. And I'm not afraid to say that because it was true. She was an England and that's all she really cared about. Helen, how can you put it on him when I'm doing the talking?
They can hear you. They can hear you.
Anyway.
This guy's a real Hollywood type.
Anyway.
You're talking about running for city council or something like that?
That's known as being upstaged by the cameraman. Anyway, Dad is, I think, is the one that told me this, and I really, it stuck with me because it was typical. Anyway, and of course you won't understand this unless you were a farmer and knew about calving and that kind of thing. And so what she said about Dad when he wanted to get married, he was 28 years old, he said, she says, the boy wants to get married and he's hardly dry behind the ears. Now the reason for that explanation, for that expression, if you don't know about it, is that when a calf was born, the last place that a calf dried was behind its ears.
Now, I never knew that.
See, now you get an education in addition to everything else here. All right, now, did we cover yesterday about this business of our trying to hide from Pa and from JS if we didn't want to work? I think we did.
Did I do that too?
But I know that I constantly remember hiding behind trees and staying in the thicket and stuff because Pa had, you know, hire men and stuff, and I knew if he'd have found me that he'd put me to work, so I tried to hide. And Helen has already confessed many times that she used to try to hide behind the house and sit on the porch in the corner where nobody could see her so that JS wouldn't put her to work. Now, the one other thing I got on my list here concerning work was this milking of the cows, which is something I thoroughly detested. And if Helen, I was always worried that in the evening she would say that she had too much housework and she couldn't help with the milking, because my jaw just dropped whenever that happened. And one night I milked all 13 cows alone because nobody was available. And when I got to the last cow, JS and Minna, his second wife, showed up. And he came in the barn and he was so complimentary, you just can't believe it, because everybody by this time knew that I had milked all those cows by myself. But Helen was the best milker, and I always wanted to rope her into the deal. And she was, as a matter of fact, quite good. But some nights, I don't know if she just didn't want to, or she really had housework to do.
Of course, this is milking by hand,
Yeah.
right? No milkers.
Yeah. Now, one final thing that I want to talk about.
And
on
pulling
farm.
the separator by hand too, by the way. No electric thing.
One final thing I have on my list that a lot of people don't know about, and that is the time when Pa almost burned down the barn in the middle of the winter time, when it was full of hay and full of cows, horses, and everything else, and we'd have been in dire straits because I'm sure we didn't have any insurance. And what happened was, Dad had this John Deere tractor and it was parked outside, right outside by the barn, and of course it was in the middle of the winter in Minnesota, so it was extremely cold. And water had gotten into the gasoline tank. The gasoline tank sat right on top of the engine on this John Deere tractor. And right underneath it was a sediment bulb where you could normally see how much water the water would collect in there. And of course this thing, the sediment bulb was full of water, and the gas had to go through the sediment bulb to get into the engine. And of course it had frozen solid. And so Dad, always ingenious, he had decided to put a little fire under the sediment bulb. And of course as soon as the glass, the ice had melted, then gasoline came. And when gasoline came, we had fire. Fire was going up like this. The tank was on top, and of course the gasoline was cold, so there wasn't too much chance of an explosion right away. So he got a big board, and he tried to lever that board against the block and push it up against the sediment bulb to stop the gas from running. And then he hollered at the top of his voice for anybody, and I came out of the barn, and he told me to grab a bucket and run over to the water tank, which was on the other side of the barn, and bring water over and pour it on this thing. And I made several trips. And I think to the day that Dad died, he thought it was Martin that did this. Because he...
Well,
You
now,
don't get no respect.
Because in those days, I got no respect.
He was a little focused at the time too.
No, well,
I
yeah,
think,
he was
Give it
focused,
to him.
right. But as I've said before, I don't know if I've said it on our recordings, but Dad said to me once, he says, "Harvey, how come you can't be as conscientious about your work as Martin is?"
Well, I think that's on there twice, but it's deep in your subconscious, so it's good to get it out.
All right, now,
Coming out today.
Out of that water, I mean, that isn't the best thing to put gasoline out, is it? Does it work
well,
okay?
it worked.
Oh, yeah,
It worked. We
probably.
got it out. But of course, he was holding up that stick, you know, and he was doing a pretty good job of stopping that gas because he was pressing hard, and the wood had pressed up and pretty well blocked
Yeah.
it off. But so
Oh, brother.
but if that tank had exploded,
You've been all over.
it'd have been all over the barn, and the barn would have been on fire, and we'd have lost all the cattle and everything. And so I'm sure the Lord protected us in those days because we sure needed it, because I'm sure we didn't have any insurance. All right, there we are, and that's my speeches, except for John Milton's on his blindness. You ready for that, or you want to go on with yours?
Well,
You should mix it up a little bit.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't know if Danny here, well, of course, guess he wasn't.
We better introduce Danny. Maybe nobody knows who he is.
He wasn't, this is Danny.
He's from Norgie, I can tell you that.
He's what?
He's from Norgie.
Oregon City,
Oregon.
Oregon.
See that there shirt?
He's a mail carrier.
I'm a visiting guest tonight.
He works
I don't
for
have a
Henry
clue what's going
Clinton.
on.
He's been trying to figure out what this is.
This is what happens when you
This
retire.
may, actually, this may go
You got
on,
nothing else to do.
this may go on America's Funniest Home Videos.
That could be.
Not very likely.
I think so.
Did I tell you about when we moved to St. Paul and Paul drove through this red
No,
light?
no.
Well, I thought that was kind of neat. I was 10 years old at the time. We moved to St. Paul, Minnesota in 1945 from the farm.
That's right.
You want these off?
Yes, I do.
From the farm, and we we had been out in the country, you know. We didn't know anything about
This thing, the big
this
city.
big city. Paul comes to this red light, and he forgets to stop. I don't know. He stopped right in the middle of the intersection.
How many kids were in the car?
Oh, it was
14 or so.
It
He was
was,
distracted.
it was loaded.
We had quite a few.
Yeah. It was loaded.
This was the Brown Hudson airplane
Was it really?
with electric shift.
And hydraulic brakes.
So he was real busy.
No, anyway,
We did have
he
electric
drove in
shift.
the middle of this intersection, then he stopped, you know, and this cop, big old cop, he wasn't he?
He was scared to
He
death.
was an older
of
guy
that
too. Came over to the car and he says, "You can't do that!" And, Paul, you know how he is anyway.
So humble and
Yes,
apologetic.
oh, I'm so sorry, officer, we're just moving to the city, and I don't know how to drive, I don't know how to drive in this city, just out in from the farm, you know, and here's the cop looks at all these kids. And he just shifted gears and, "Welcome to St. Paul," he says. Drive on.
Get out of here.
That was pretty good.
That was a good story.
That was a good cop too, yeah.
Now you want me to tell about when we went to
Yeah.
school on the first day of school, and we
okay.
wanted to be sure we could have our pick of the seats in the school, so this, of course, was again in Minnesota.
We went before breakfast.
And we all just took off extremely early and walked down to this 1 mile down, and it was idiotic because nobody else was there, and we were milling about smartly there. And all of a sudden, here comes Pa showing up with his Model A Ford panel body. And Ma had got so mad because we had all gone down to school before breakfast that she'd got him, even though he was busy working and stuff, to drive down and haul us all back home again. So he hauled us all back home, so we had to have breakfast.
Mother's not gonna let you go to school without breakfast. Why don't you let Danny aim that over at you and tell a story about
This is another chapter in the saga of the giant twitchy rubes, better known as the Christensen
Oh,
family.
okay, we were going home from District 13, and this little short banty rooster was
District
walking.
25, wasn't it?
No, 13.
Really?
District 13. And he said, "You kids can't walk on this road because my dad built it." So he made all the kids walk in the ditch.
And it's full of snow.
Oh, deep snow. And I was going over there over shoes and everything. And it made me madder than hops. Because it's my little sister's brother.
You didn't do it though, right?
I did.
She was
He had all the
constantly
rest of it
fighting
down
with
there.
him.
So, I just had a little battle royal with him. And he just put my face right down in the snow.
Well,
But-
our,
Well, Lolly Swenson was a little bit of a guy. He was a banty rooster. He was the only son of this family that was pretty well to do. And I can remember when he got his first bicycle. And he was so smart, you know. Of course, we were poor. We didn't have a bicycle. But he was insecure because he had an aunt that, or was it a sister, older sister?
Sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law that lived with him. He was his brother and he must have had a brother then, an older brother. Anyway, he was picked on at home quite a bit, but he was a mama's boy, and he was spoiled, and he was, I don't know if I should put all this on there, maybe Lolly will see this. Anyway, Lolly Swenson was his name, and the interesting thing is that 2 years ago, when Helen and I were back in Minnesota, we drove, he lives in Green Lake, Minnesota now, and so when we stayed at Green Lake one night, and I said, we got to call up Lolly, so we called him up, no answer on the phone. So then we drove over to his place, because we had the address there, and had a nice place and everything. Great big dog in the back, barking his head off and everything. So we went back to our motel. We must have left a message on the answering machine. Because later on at night or that next morning, he called and he was frantic to have breakfast with us. So we had breakfast. And he, of course, now he's an entirely different person. But he still looks exactly like his dad when his dad was. But back in those days, he was having a growing up problem. And Helen was constantly fighting with the guy.
Oh, I was protecting my sister and brothers, but I didn't want to kill them.
Because I can remember over at Elmer's Hill, I can remember you standing up on that bank and him throwing rocks at you and you throwing rocks at him. And there was a constant struggle with that guy. But the interesting thing was that Helen and he were in the same confirmation class. And he had a stuttering problem. And he was bashful besides, and practically illiterate, I guess. And he didn't know any of his recitations for the...
He did, but he stuttered too bad. Couldn't say them.
So Helen did his recitations for the confirmation.
So that's right.
But he used to pick her up with the car. So it's interesting how, as we develop, we improve sometimes. All right, Helen, it's your turn again. I just been
Sometimes
stealing the thunder here.
No,
You didn't look
we
at
gotta
that.
see
We didn't
that.
get that
Danny's
far.
gotta see that.
That was just absolutely...
Yeah.
Okay, what's
I
your
can't tell you
list,
about that
Harold?
because it's already recorded.
I don't have a thing left on my list. I know when I go back to, I will think of many things that I wanted to say.
Well,
Maybe we could do a phone thing.
we can.
Over the-
I can inject this poem by John Milton
Oh,
in
let's
here
have that.
if you want. And John Milton was blind, and he lived from 1608 to 1674. And because he was blind, he was quite a well-known poet, as a matter of fact. But because he was blind, he, or whatever, he decided to write this poem about being blind and whether or not he was supposed to do any work or something, whatever. Anyway, this is how it went. The poem is called On His Blindness. It's a sonnet, really. When I consider, this is just a portion of it. When I consider how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, doth God exact day labor light denied, I fondly ask. Who best bears his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed, and post our land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. That's good. Particularly
Okay.
for people when they get into wheelchairs like we are going to be someday. We need
Very
to
good.
know
Call.
that we serve too if we only stand and wait.
How
Okay.
about sitting
He's on. He's got it over here now.
Oh, I got, huh?
You got something?
Yeah, I got something. Well,
We
first
want
I'll
some
tell you-
laughing stuff
I'll
now.
tell you
We got
this
the
little
serious stuff.
Well, I got one more serious thing here, but I got to tell you what Pa, cute little joke he liked to tell about the fellow that was getting, he was 25, 30 years old, and his wife, his mother. There's a lot of outtakes here, I'll tell you. His mother.
Ready, set, go.
His mother said, it's time for you to go out and find a wife. Now, you need a wife. You're 25, 30 years old, whatever. And so he said, well, no.
Let's try.
It was his father. It was-
Take two.
It was his father. And
Are you sure? You know?
hold it now.
No? You know, you're sure you
Well, I
know?
think we're
That's
thoroughly
the way
confused.
I tell jokes.
Hold it now. His
Let's
father-
get the punchline. Anyway.
His father said, you gotta go out and find a wife now. And he said, well, he says, easy for you, Dad. You had Ma to go to. I have to go to complete strangers.
I remember that.
That's the story Dad used to love.
That's a
to tell.
cute
Oh,
story.
yeah.
That's a typical Norwegian joke. It doesn't matter.
Did we ever get in there about Dad and the keys? There were a few things that really annoyed Dad, and one of them was losing the keys to that Model A panel body we had on the farm. Because, of course, with a dozen kids running around, you never knew where the keys were, and those keys would get lost. And there was about only one four-letter word that he'd ever use. And when he used it, we knew things
We
were...
would need to put that on.
No, I'm not going to say what it is. But
What's the first letter?
it starts with
Ask your
S.
mother.
But anyway,
And you find it in the barnyard.
when we knew when he used that word, he was mad. And one day he was storming around there and he couldn't find those keys. And so, of course, they finally found them. Oh, we got to tell also about the cream separator. But anyway,
Stop interrupting
anyway, so
I'll make a
so
note.
when he found those keys, he took this great big piece of metal that was for throwing marbles. It had holes in it where and you rolled marbles on the floor and they went up into this thing and they had different numbers by the different holes. And he took some wire and he wired through one of those holes and threw the keys. So from that time on, we had this big piece of metal with the keys. So whenever we drove down the road, we had this big piece of metal hanging from the ignition. Do you remember the time when we lost the nut that went on top of that thing that went in the cream separator? It fell into the cistern.
The discs, the thing that made the discs tight.
Yeah, that drum, that big drum thing that went with the cream separator. That nut on the top, just a nut, you know, but that big round, and it fell into the cistern, right?
You know why? Because that's where we washed it out there on top of it.
That's exactly where we washed it. And of course, there had to be a board missing on the cover.
Oh.
And that was just big enough for that thing to slip in there, and it fell down in there. And Pa had to get down in there with a ladder. And fortunately, there wasn't more than about that much water at that time. But there was no way that he could reach down with his hand. It was so deep, he had to get down there and walk around in his bare feet in that cold water until he could feel the...
Oh my.
He could feel the mud with his...
Wasn't there mice in there too?
Farming
Dead
wasn't
mice?
easy back
I
there.
think we found dead mice in that cistern too, floating around.
Well, you remember the cats on the farm, how the tomcats would kill the kittens and stuff? We had to hide the kittens when we had a lot of cats, of course, on the farm.
That or mice.
All right, have we got enough now so we can watch this?
No, we should have on there what Martin Luther said about the Holy Spirit leading him.
Well, we had that yesterday.
Oh, we had that yesterday, yeah.
Oh, is that
Oh,
on there?
it's on
That's
there.
on there.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
That's
my
about
goodness.
Katie, yeah. We got that on there.
Oh, I'll tell you.
So
Well,
let's
I think
think of
that's
something
about-
else. One year we got a lot of grain, and we had this granary was full of grain, and we had the sheep that would get out of the fence. They were supposed to stay in this area, and somehow or another they would get out and they'd head right for this granary. And I don't know whether the door was open or whether it was bulging through and running out, but the grain, and anyway, the sheep would go over there, and Martin, he was so conscientious and so frantic if something didn't go right. And when those sheep would head right for that granary and start to eat, he would have a fit. And I don't know why. He had a temper anyway. And so he went over there one day. I remember this. And he was just madder than hot.
Oh, I remember
And he
that.
grabbed this sheep by the head and he says, "Well, eat then." He shoved it. Well, eat